There's a moment most people never talk about. Your phone buzzes, group chat, plans tonight, and before you've even typed a reply, something in your chest sinks. Not because you don't like these people, you do, but some part of you is already grieving the evening you could have had alone. Sound familiar? If it does, I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to say goes against almost everything you've been taught about what it means to be healthy, connected, and okay. Let's start with something specific. Think of the last time your plans got canceled. Not rescheduled, canceled. For a lot of people, especially the ones watching a psychology channel at whatever hour this is, the first thing you felt wasn't guilt, it was relief. And then almost immediately after that relief came a second feeling. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. But that second feeling, that instinct to pathologize your own preference for quiet, that is worth examining very closely. Because it didn't come from nowhere. It was installed. We live in a culture that has quietly, persistently treated solitude like a symptom. Like if you prefer your own company, there must be a wound underneath it. Attachment trauma, social anxiety, some deficit that drove you inward. And I want to be honest with you, sometimes that's true. Isolation can absolutely be a hiding place, and I'll come back to that. But sometimes a person just thinks better alone, feels more like themselves alone, loves harder, lives fuller, creates more freely, alone. And we have almost no cultural script for that being completely fine. Let me introduce you to research that should be far more well-known than it is. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent years studying what she called highly sensitive people, roughly 15 to 20% of the population. And the key finding wasn't that these people feel more intensely than others. It's that their nervous systems process information more deeply. The distinction matters enormously. These aren't fragile people who cry at everything. These are people whose brains are running significantly more cognitive and emotional processes per social interaction than the average person's. More threads, more analysis, more intake. And when you're running that many processes, you need more time to defragment. Think about your laptop. If you've had 47 browser tabs open all day, it doesn't matter how new the machine is. It needs to cool down. It needs to close some things. That's not weakness. That's just how a high processing system works. So when you come home from a full evening out and need hours or days before you feel like yourself again, you're not being antisocial. You're recovering from something that genuinely cost you more than it cost the person sitting next to you. Here's what the research actually says, and it's more interesting than the usual take. Psychologist Reed Larson spent years studying solitude and found something that surprised a lot of people. Voluntary solitude, solitude that was chosen rather than forced, was associated with improved mood and significantly higher rates of self-reflection when people returned to social settings. The operative word there is chosen. Forced isolation is genuinely corrosive. John Cacioppo's famous research at the University of Chicago showed that loneliness activates the same neural threat responses as physical pain. We are wired for connection. That's real, and it's not up for debate. But the jump from humans need connection to humans should always want to be around people is a logical error. And a lot of people have built their entire self-concept around that error, spending years quietly exhausted, trying to live up to a social appetite they simply don't have. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine someone, let's call her Amara. She's 29, works in marketing, genuinely likes the people in her life. She's not shy, not depressed, not damaged. But every time a group trip gets planned, she feels a slow dread building about a week out. She goes anyway, every time, because not going feels like a character indictment. She comes back exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. And for years, she assumed she just wasn't social enough, like there was a more evolved version of herself she hadn't grown into yet. It never occurred to her that she wasn't behind, that she was just wired differently. What does it cost someone to spend years masking a natural preference? You go to the parties, you fill the silences, you answer the phone when you don't have the bandwidth, and all of that, compounded over time, creates this low-level exhaustion that people usually blame on work or stress or being busy. They never stop to ask, what if I've just been living slightly outside myself for a very long time? Sit with that question, seriously. Here's the part that people who haven't experienced chosen, intentional solitude don't fully understand. It's not the absence of noise, it's the presence of something else. When you stop filling every gap with input, with podcasts, with scrolling, with plans, you get uninterrupted access to your own inner life. And your inner life is where your values actually live. It's where your intuitions get sorted. It's where the emotions you were too busy to feel during the week finally get processed. People who are genuinely comfortable alone, not avoidant, not shut down, but comfortable, tend to have a clearer sense of what they actually think before the room influences them. They're more comfortable disagreeing because they've already had the argument with themselves in the quiet. They've interrogated their own positions before anyone else could. That's a kind of cognitive independence that is becoming genuinely rare. And I say that in a world that has engineered entire platforms specifically to make stillness feel unbearable, where your boredom is monetized, where the moment you're alone with your thoughts, 17 apps are designed to interrupt that. Choosing to sit with your own mind, undistracted, is one of the more quietly radical things a person can do right now. I told you I'd come back to this, and I meant it. Solitude can become a hiding place. There's a version of restoration, and there's a version of retreating, and only you know which one you're doing. Recharging feels like restoration. You go in depleted, and you come out fuller, clearer, more capable of real connection. Retreating feels like relief at first, but it slowly curdles into something flatter, numbness, disconnection, a life that's safe because it's small. If you've ever spent a weekend completely alone and come out of it feeling worse, vaguer, more hollow, that's information, not a judgment. Information about what kind of alone you were doing. The people who navigate solitude best are the ones who don't turn it into an identity. They're not loners. They're not introverts as a brand. They're just tending to something, the way you'd water a plant. They go inward, they process, and then they come back, usually more regulated, more present, more capable of the kind of intimacy that actually requires you to show up as yourself. If you felt relief when the plans got canceled, if you've always felt slightly more yourself in the quiet than in the crowd, I'm not going to tell you that's a superpower. That framing is just as reductive as the one that called it a flaw. What I'll say instead is this. Your nervous system is not broken. Your preference is not a wound. And the only real mistake, the one that actually costs you, is spending so long defending that preference, or hiding it, or apologizing for it, that you never actually use it. The most important conversations you will ever have are the ones you have with yourself in the silence. Are you giving yourself the space to have them? Before you go, I want to ask you something genuinely. When did you last spend real time alone? Not lonely, not scrolling, but actually alone with your own thoughts. And what did you find there? Drop it in the comments. And if this hit something real for you, subscribe, because this is exactly what this channel is for.